We'll go straight into the next talk, which is by Niamh Mahon from the James Hutton Institute. And she's going to talk to us about the importance of backyard poultry registration as it relates to avian influenza. Thanks, Niamh.
Sort of, yeah. I can go forward. So, following recent large-scale avian influenza outbreaks, new measures were introduced in the UK to better protect the poultry sector. All poultry keepers are now required to officially register their poultry on national registers. Prior to this change, poultry keepers with flocks of less than 50 birds could voluntarily register, but for keepers of over 50 birds, this was mandatory. Despite, or maybe in some cases because of, the increasing industrialization and intensification of poultry production during the 20th century, backyard poultry keeping has become increasingly popular. Recent estimates suggest there could be as many as 5 million pet chickens in the UK. Within this community, the news of the registration announcement caused concern and confusion. Relatively little is known about how these backyard keepers manage the health and welfare of their birds, exceptions being work by Carol, who's in the room somewhere. However, what is known is that these backyard keepers rely on the internet as a place to debate issues and share information, especially on health and welfare topics. The aim of this investigation was to explore the relationships between backyard keepers and their birds, particularly focused on the ways in which poultry keepers manage the health and welfare of their animals and how the change in legislation was perceived by these keepers. So, our work consisted of 3 different strands, taking 3 different approaches. The first strand consisted of in-person and online workshops with poultry keepers in Scotland. We conducted 3 workshops with a total of 36 participants in Huntly in Aberdeenshire, Lerwick in Shetland, and 1 workshop online. The second strand was a content analysis of Facebook posts on the perceptions of the change in registration. And the third strand was an ethnography of online poultry keeping communities. The content analysis and ethnography explored 4 active public UK poultry and smallholder Facebook groups. Contemporary and retrospective posts were analysed to see the change in perspectives over time. A quick note on ethnography, because it's quite a new method. This is a qualitative methodology that adapts ethnography to the study of cultures and communities online. It emphasises holistic contextual understandings via prolonged periods of immersion into online spaces. And researchers produce immersion journals rather than taking data directly from these posts. There are all sorts of ethical issues to do with that. Please ask me afterwards if you're interested. For our investigation, 2 researchers conducted ethnographies concurrently, producing 2 immersion journals which were then used during the analysis. So, we took a more than human geographies approach to analysing these findings. From this perspective, there's often a kind of perceived divide between commercial poultry production and backyard keepers. And this acts, however unintentionally, to further separate the 2 groups and flatten kind of diversity within these groups. However, a key finding of our research was that backyard keepers are a really diverse group. They keep different species, different breeds of birds, different ages and sexes of birds. These birds are kept in hugely variable conditions for many different reasons. One way to think of this is in terms of a spectrum of roles in which these birds inhabit. They could be thought of entirely as livestock, as pets with purpose, and entirely as companion animals or pets. Where a bird is placed on this spectrum relates to how the bird is valued and the reasons why they're kept. And there are many ways to value these birds. For example, for their relational and companionship value, for their aesthetic value, for their productive and reproductive value, for their genetic value, and for their financial value. This is important because where a bird is placed on this spectrum determines how backyard keepers kind of interacted and engaged with the change in registration. It's important to note here that a bird's place and role on this spectrum can change over space and time. A really good example of this is the case of ex-commercial hens that are rehomed. They might start off their life as livestock in commercial systems. When they're rehomed, they very often become pets with purpose, a pet that will give you eggs. However, as they go towards the end of their life, they stop being able to produce eggs, and then they become entirely a pet. And this often coincides with a second rehoming event. We observed a tension between the tendency of legislation towards universalism and standardization, and backyard keepers' unique and context-specific relationships with their birds. For example, there were those that worried that registration would make their pets more visible to disease control measures that were more commonly applied in livestock production systems, for example, culling. However, others saw registration as an important way to protect rare breed birds of high genetic and financial value. In terms of backyard keepers' engagement with registration, many keepers questioned who benefited from this change. It was difficult for some backyard keepers to accept registration when it's framed as a way to protect the livestock industry. Many of these keepers understood their poultry keeping as part of a dissatisfaction and resistance to these industrialized food systems in which birds are kept in ways that they perceive as unhealthy and unnatural. Others expressed concerns about the extent of registration and its scope, with many keepers suspicious of authority and worried about additional burdens that registration could entail. For example, financial cost, the needing to have a CPH number, and the need to register animal movements. Workshop participants in particular linked registration to memories and concerns about the culls of livestock animals during the foot and mouth epidemic, which shows how long these memories survive and how strong they were. So in light of these findings, we suggest messaging around registration should do more to recognize the spectrum of roles that backyard poultry inhabit, and should move away from kind of negative and potentially frightening messages towards those that promote the positive benefits of registration. Part of this could be around developing a culture of responsible poultry keeping and neighbourliness around poultry keeping. So what are the qualities, signs and signifiers of a good chicken keeper in multi-species environments? Examples of this could include things like poultry being quiet, providing eggs that you can give away to your friends and neighbours, the bird coops and living areas being clean, tidy, visually appealing, and free of visible pests and parasites. Could work be done to fold being registered into this kind of identity as a good poultry keeper? To do this, registration needs to be promoted not only in terms of protecting the commercial poultry sector, or because it's a law mandated by government, or maybe not even in terms of disease, which could be frightening and kind of confusing for backyard poultry keepers, but because these keepers care about the welfare of their human and other than human community. Thank you very much.